everyone. Welcome back to a Teams in 20 session. Today, the star of the show is going to still be SharePoint. So we've started the story last week. So today is part 2, but this time we're going to focus a bit more on communication sites. And we have our amazing Chris back to delight you.
So picking up from last week, if you haven't watched last week's where we talked about files, I highly recommend you go back and look at that. We're going to touch on a few things we talked about last time, but mostly we're going to be focused on the other persona of SharePoint. I talked last time about how there's kind of two primary personas for SharePoint. There's the file sharing, which is what most people are familiar with, and then there's sites or intranets, and usually the purview of comms people. But what we've tried to do with SharePoint site development is democratize it and make it super easy for anyone to create an intranet site. And what we find then is that intranet sites, because they're easier to create, then the communications teams aren't overburdened. They can kind of delegate the actual content creation out to most of the people of the organization, and they can focus on search optimization and, information architecture and all those terms that internal communicators know all about. So let me start with the why a little bit. Some of these are the same as last time. A single source of truth is very important, not just for documents, but for news posts and content. Right. It's one thing to, if you send out an email, for example, with a bunch of news information in it, somebody could forward that email and maybe edit the email, and you'd have multiple versions of the truth. Whereas, if you're sending out the email that just has a link to a SharePoint site, whereas this is the truth about this news, then there's no risk of that. An evergreen platform is another big deal. So access to the latest and greatest things that are always being released. So this applies to everything in Microsoft 365, of course, but very important for these kinds of sites. You can get the latest features without doing this big, long upgrade process, which we've had in the past for upgrading an intranet platform. So for example, as I was putting this together, I just saw a new feature about new templates for publishing news on your site that makes it easy to publish that news out to email. To go back to that previous scenario. So always new features coming along. Very easy to author and edit content on the sites, and you will see that if you've ever used, if you happen to have ever used, shoot, I'm forgetting the name of it. I'm blocking on it anyway. Popular website editors out on the market. Wow, why am I forgetting that one? It works very similar to those. It does not require web development skills to build an intranet anymore. And then compliance, of course, retaining and protecting files is very important, but that's also true of the web content that you publish as well. So you can put sensitivity labels and retention on these things as well. Okay. Another key kind of conceptual piece is, what do I use for communications? So we still see a lot of customers who were enamored with Teams as it got rolled out, and they decided to create these massive teams that include everybody in them and pump out their, instead of doing an email blast, they're doing a Teams blast. And it's just not how we thought about it or designed it. As we build Microsoft 365, there are these these apps have their purpose. What are they fit for? So Teams is really supposed to be focused on teamwork. Outlook is where I get targeted, directed things that, or maybe restricted things that can't be forwarded outside of the company. It has a very specific purpose and shouldn't be for every type of communication, so that it can be focused on the most important and targeted things just for me. Then there's Viva Engage. I think we've got sessions on Viva Engage on Teams in 20 as well. And you can go and learn about how to be connected across the entire organization, have really large conversations that involve the entire organization or departments or, cross-team kinds of engagement and two-way interaction. And then you have SharePoint for communications is really about the intranet. So this is depth content, not just a small little post that you might put on Viva Engage. You can stop doing, multi-page emails. That depth content should go on SharePoint. And what you send in email is just couple of blurbs so that they can get on with their work, and a link to the depth content on SharePoint so that they can interact with that there at their leisure. So WordPress, thank you, attendee. Thank you very much. WordPress. Yes, you'll see that the authoring interaction is very similar to WordPress if you've ever used that. Okay. So how is SharePoint? How are SharePoint intranets organized? So what is the hierarchy or the structure of these things? Let me start at the very top, which actually isn't even on this slide. And I thought it was a build slide, but that's okay. You can have it all at once. At the very top, you actually have something called a home site. So a home site is a communication site. So all the sites that I'm talking about here in this session today are communication sites that are different from team sites. So you get with a team, you get a SharePoint site that's associated with it. That's called a team site. It can actually be included in this whole hierarchy of a SharePoint intranet if you want to, but it just looks differently. It has a few different features, whereas a communication site is intended to be open to everyone in the organization for read only, but then has its features. It's meant to be part of an intranet. So back to my hierarchy. A home site is a communication site, but it just has a tag on it that basically says this site is kind of the home base for the entire organization, and its news, the news that I publish there, is going to be priority. So everyone is going to see it. It's going to have a special flag on it that tells everyone that it's from that official source. It also is the place that I customize global navigation. So I can create a navigation bar that is available to everyone across the organization, and that's only done at a home site. So a home site is a very special kind of communication site. You can have up to 3 of them in normally if you have a complex organization, and you can go up to 10 if you purchase Viva Connections, which is a premium SKU on top of SharePoint. It also has a Viva Connections dashboard, which I'll show you a glimpse of in the future. Yeah, so that's the home site. A hub site, so that's now the top of this hierarchy here. A hub site is, again, just a communication site, but it has an extra piece of metadata on it that says I'm a hub. And then when I'm a hub, I can have a piece of navigation at the very top, a strip of navigation that is shared by all of the other sites that are members of the hub. So I can take a site and make it a member of this hub, or I can make it a member of that hub. And the idea is that when you reorganize, so for example, the marketing organization moves under the sales organization. That doesn't make any sense, but you see what I mean? We get reorganized all the time. We can take that site and move it to associate it with a different site hub, rather than rebuild or try to migrate a whole set of pages to a new site. We can just detach it from one hub and attach it to another one. Hub sites also provide scoped search and aggregation of news in easy ways. And this will make more sense as I get to the demo, but I wanted you to see the hierarchy here. Okay, then we have the communication site itself. Again, these were all communication sites, the site hub, the home site, but their special versions of a communication site. This one's just a plain Jane one, so right here in the middle, and it has a set of owners. So the owners can decide, have God powers over the whole site. And then you can have a set of members, which are typically site members are the authors. So they can be creating pages and news posts as part of the site, but they may have to be approved by the site owners, depending on how you set it up. So you can set up an approval process by which those authors can contribute content and then have it go through an approval. There are also files and lists, just like there were on team sites that we talked about last week, and you can lock those down in unique ways in special circumstances. So, but the core of a communication site is really the pages and news that you post there as an intranet. You may have something like a Word document or a slide presentation or something that you might want to expose on those pages as an exception, but for the most part, they're pages and news posts that we're dealing with. And all of these things, like we talked about last time with metadata, if you go back and look at that one, that metadata applies to these other pieces as well, okay? So you have metadata to use for your targeting. Okay, so let us get to the demo. Let me see. So I'm starting at the beginning. What I'm going to do is just create a communication site and show you just how to create a page and edit a page, some basics, and then go to more completed ones so you can see kind of the art of the possible. So from office.com, I'm starting at the very beginning. I just go to SharePoint, and at the SharePoint start page, I can create a site. And here's your two types of sites again. So if I'm picking a communication site, that's for my intranet. And I'm going to call it a Teams in 20 demo here and finish. And it's going to create that site for me. Now, when it creates the site, you get some options now for templates. So you can actually create some templates specifically for your organization for it to draw from. But if we browse for these templates, so you can see the ones from Microsoft, and then there's ones you can specify from your organization. So you can template a site, and your IT organization will have to do that. But I'm just going to pick one of these guys here. I'm going to pick the, what was I going to pick? The departmental one, right? So here's a departmental one. You can see what kind of pages, so what you're going to get with that template, and then click use template. And what it's doing is now taking the site that's already been created and then just creating those assets, those pages, and putting some web parts on there to make for a nice kind of starter design. But then it's just a template, so you can take it in any direction that you want to. But I thought I'd show you how quickly you can get to a pretty good looking site that gets close to what you need. Okay, so it's got some next steps over here. Going to close that, but here we are, our brand new communication site. So now I can just customize what's on here. I can remove and add different items, rearrange them as I need to, but this was closest to what I wanted. So I'm just going to edit the page then to show you how easy it is to edit this stuff. So what we've got to start with is a page is divided into sections. So these are horizontal sections for the most part. You can have a vertical section, but for the most part, it's horizontal sections. And then each section, so let's take this one, for example. If I edit this section, you'll see the side panel open up, and I can say, right now it's a 3-column one, but I want it in just 2 columns. What it did is put it in 2 columns and put those 2 into the 1 column together, right? So now I can just drag these things around, right, into this 3-column format here. So that's editing a section then. You can create new sections with these plus signs to put something in between. But then below a section level, each section will have the columns, and then each column has web parts. So you're seeing a text, just a standard text web part here. This one is a quick links web part. You can see the configuration come up here when I click on one of these. There's different ways you can format each of these. So film strips, compact, so different ways you could format the same content. And then, for each of these, they might have edit options for each button. So I can go in and change, just the icon for this, make it this one instead. I'm gonna move select that. Oops. There we go. So I've changed the icon on there. So it's really point and click, very simple to do. If I wanted to add a web part, I can come down here and you see the plus sign that shows up. I can put it below here, and I want to, so now I can browse through all the different web parts that are available. I can just add a text one just to give you a simple idea. I can easily just do, put in some text, right? I can even do a screen grab, for example. I do this weird little screen grab here and just copy and paste images can go in. There's a fair amount of editing that you can do here in just a text web part, right? But you can get pretty fancy with your web parts. Let me show you an example here. So you can actually take a Power App. So without going into the weeds of what a Power App is, just imagine it as a very simple, easy to create app that you might experience on a phone, but you can also embed in a web part. So I've got the ID of an app here that I've built previously, and I can embed it here. Oh, well, that's interesting. I don't know why it's coming up with that, but that app should be just appearing and working there. It's probably something to do with my trial tenant here, but the app would just appear embedded within the overall site. So you can do that as well. Okay, let's go to a complete one. This is one that I've kind of been working on as a demo for a while, and you'll see it's branded NHS Scotland, but you can take on your own branding, of course. And this is a home site. I was talking about that top level, and so you can tell because it has this Viva Connections dashboard. The dashboard, again, without going deep into Viva Connections and what it does, but these are interactive kind of web parts that enable me to get data from other systems like payslips or our leave and so on. This is how I book my leave, is through Viva Connections little app that makes it just easy to do, request time off and things like that. So this takes some development to get these working, but if you can have one dashboard for your company and target these things to different people. Okay, and speaking of targeting, let me show you how that kind of works, because it's one of the first questions people ask when they talk about an intranet homepage in particular. You want to make sure the content is relevant for everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and edit this. Wow, we're already getting close to 20 minutes. It's amazing how fast this goes. But what I can do here on this web part is news. I can edit the web part and then say I want to get news from all of the sites that are a member of this hub. So this is also not just a home site, but a hub site. Or I can say I'm going to hand pick the sites, and I've got a few others here that have more news, and you can see that as I picked a different selection here, more news came in as I decided to aggregate news in from other sites. So for example, here's the other site, and it has GGC in this case, and it has separate pieces of news. You can see that that's getting aggregated in here now. And I can do further targeting through what's called audience targeting. So if I turn on audience targeting, then what happens is I define audiences, meaning they are in Azure Active Directory. I say this is the marketing department, or this is the maternity ward, or whatever, or these are all of the physicians and all the nurses or whatever. And so I can create these audiences and then target the news appropriately so that only those people who are relevant will see that news. Okay, and then I wanted to just show real quickly here, right, the navigation piece, right? So this Glasgow site that I switched to now is a hub as well. So you can see a set of navigation at the top here that I can edit manually, or I have a site level navigation as well. And if I go to human resources, for example, this is a different site. You'll see it's a completely different site, has its own navigation, but it shares that top level navigation with the Glasgow site, right? So if I go back to that human resources site and I say, okay, I'm going to change the information for this site. Let's say, for example, it's moved now, and we think that this site should not be a part of the Glasgow site, but should be a part of the national site. So I'm just going to switch to NHS Scotland, hit save. And what it does is it changes the theming. So you can see the color, the branding changed essentially. And now I have the same navigation as, where'd it go? Where'd it go? Well, the top left, yeah, so sorry, let me discard changes here. Right, so this was the home page, right? And now that site is no longer a member of the Glasgow hub, but is a member of the national hub. That makes sense. So that's how kind of hubs work. Gosh, there was one more. Do we have time for one more little demo? Go back here. I'm just going to show really fast, because what I've been showing is really static information. And I just wanted to get across the point that this can be interactive as well. So on this page, I've got two things to demonstrate. One is Power BI. Power BI dashboards can also be embedded right in here. And this is fully interactive, right? This report. So I can filter and I can filter this report, the ways that allows me to interactively on the website. Then I also have here two web parts that are actually interacting with each other. So if I click on GPs, for example, this list of applications that I'm linking off to filters for just that role, right? And the way I've done this is basically I've got a list with a couple of items for each role, and that list is called role filter for apps. And then I've got this other list called the application. So this list, and these lists are just formatted to look like buttons, right? See, I've created a view that looks like buttons, but if I apply this, you can see it's just a list, right? But if I choose the button view, it looks like this, okay? So with this one, what I've done is turned on dynamic filtering so that the column in this list for the role, it gets filtered when an object in this list is selected. So in other words, I select GP here, there's a column in this list that says GP for each of these applications. So this web part is getting filtered by the actions on this one. I hope that made sense. I went a little bit faster than I normally would have, but I wanted to show how you can create some interactivity within these pages and not just have static content. All right, so that's all for today. There's so much more to be had within to learn about with sites, but hopefully that gives you an idea.
Thanks so much, Chris. I think everyone agrees to me when we say we could listen to you for hours. Which would be really useful to all of us. Next week, just to give you a little spoiler, so next session is going to be on Wonderful Copilot. It's also a session that was quite popular, so the demand is quite high for this one as well. And I'll be honest, myself, I want to attend the session to learn more. And then we're going to have a session on the 20th of September on building your champions network, and future sessions will be announced soon. Fingers crossed music works now. If not, hopefully next week it will. But thank you so much for attending, and see you all next week.
All right. Thanks, everyone.